today's video tutorial, we're going to be talking about pagination. I currently have a project set up. I'm going to log in and I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. So here I am in my project. It's pretty plain for right now, but I went ahead and set up this users table right here, and I'm using Vue.js with the Vuetify material design UI. By default, Vuetify gives me a pretty cool pagination down here that I can just click the next. I can change the rows per page. It's pretty awesome. It's a nice little add-on to the table, the data table that Vuetify provides. But the issue with this is sometimes your application gets really big. Right now you can say I only have 151 users in my table. But what if I had 151,000 users in my table? I wouldn't want to pull all 151,000 users at once. I would want to chunk it. I would want to break it up into maybe groups of 50 or groups of 100. I wouldn't want to pull the entire database out at one time. So although this is really nice, I want to change it up and I want to make it a reusable component. I'm going to add a pagination component that I can reuse across my entire application. That's the goal. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we're going to do is we're actually going to break this. So I'm going to pull up my Chrome developer tools. I'm using Command Option I, and I just want to see, I'm going to refresh the page, and I just want to see what the data looks like. So this is what it's coming back as from my API. So we're actually going to break this, and we're using Laravel for our backend, and Laravel has a pretty cool built-in pagination for us. So let's go ahead and check that out. In my app, HTTP controllers, my API, and this is my users controller. Depending on your application, you could use this method with really any data that you return from your API. So right here, my index method is just using users return all. Give me every user in the application. But we want to change that. We're going to assume our application is going to explode and we're going to have 1 million users. So we want to tell Laravel to paginate that data coming back to us. And it's really simple. So we just type paginate. And that's really it. You could add other things in here if you wanted to include relational data, if you wanted to sort your data, order by, all that kind of stuff. But for right now, we just want to tell Laravel to send us this data back and paginate it. So I'm going to Command S to save, and then I'm going to refresh. Now remember what this looked like. It's going to look different this time. So Command R to refresh my page, and we can see it's not coming back the way our application expected it. It's not coming back the way that Vuetify expected to see the data. So let's click on all, and I'm going to pull this up. Now Laravel changed the way the data comes back to us, and we actually have a lot of information here. So let's talk about it. First, it gives us our current page. As we change and paginate, right now I just said to paginate, so it's giving me the default pagination. If I wanted to, I could say paginate 10, and I'm going to say Command S to save. And now I'm telling it I only want 10 records. Only send me back 10 records at a time, and then let me step through them. So let me refresh. Before I do that, we can already see I have, looks like I have 15 records if you include 0. So I got 15 records here. This time I'm going to refresh. I'm going to click on all. This time I'm expecting to only have 10, which I have 10. If I wanted to do more, I could say send me back 50, and Laravel will send me back 50 records. You can see this URL right here, first page URL. It appends the question mark page -1. We can actually change that, and we could say give us page 3 or give us page 8. It's saying from 1 to 10. So this collection that it sent us has from record 1 to record 10. It's saying that the last page is page 16, since we told it to give us 10 records each time. We have 151 records, so we have 16 pages that we can go through. Our last page URL is page 16. Our next page URL, so we're on page 1. If we wanted to go to the next page, we would have to go to page 2. It's giving us the path that we used, and that's the path of API v1 user/all. Now this might change depending on whether you're doing users or products or whatever your application needs. And then we're saying per page 10, previous page. Now this is going to be null because we're on the first page, so that makes sense. We're not expecting it to give us back a previous page URL. We've already talked about 2, and the total amount is 151 records. So Laravel, just with adding the paginate instead of all to our return users, we're actually getting a whole lot of data about what's in our database. So let's go ahead and use that and create our own pagination. Instead of returning everything in our database at once, for the sake of this tutorial, I'm just going to leave it as 10. Give me 10 records at a time. Allow me to paginate through them. When I click the next button, grab the next 10 records. I might have includes, relational includes, where I want to include additional data about that user. And as you start adding these nested relationships, the data can get pretty big. So it makes sense to paginate it in this way instead of the default pagination that was provided to us. So let's go ahead and dive in and build our own pagination. And we're actually going to use Vuetify with Laravel to step through this data. So the first thing I want to do, I'm going to come over here. I'm going to minimize this a little bit. Let's go ahead and get rid of this rows per page. We're going to create our own. So let's hide that to start with. And in order I can get rid of this, this is all working. So I'm going to minimize that. Let's come back over here, and I believe we have the ability to hide default footer, and that's what I want to do. Command S to save. I'm using the Vuetify material design library right here. Maybe you're using a different library, but a lot of the methods we're going to do today should be very similar. Just the look might be different for you. I'm hiding the default footer that's provided, which is this right here. So Command R to refresh, and as you can see, I got rid of that, but I got an error. Why did I get an error? Expected an array, got an object. All right, so we got an error. Why are we getting an error? Let's come back here. Right now we're returning users, and our users data doesn't look the same as it used to. So we want to look at, we'll come over here to all, and we actually want to look at the data. So each time this information comes back, we want to look at data. So come back over here. In our users, let me show you my store user. Users right now is storing the entire response data that we're receiving. So it's actually storing current page data, first page URL, everything that we see in here. And the reason we're getting this error is because it's expecting an array and got an object. And the object that it got is everything that we see here. What we really want it to see is just data. So let's tell it to look at just data. We'll come back over here. Now we're returning this store state user users. I'm just going to say data and Command S to save. Now I'm telling it, look inside of this object at the data array, and let's see if that fixes it for us. We'll come back over here. I'm going to Command R to refresh. There we go. We have our data, but we don't have our footer, which is what we wanted. So let's go ahead and add our pagination to the bottom here. We're going to build our own custom pagination. All right, so let's go over to Vuetify.js.com. And I'm going to go to documentation and then UI components, and let's see what they have for paginations. So this is basically what we want. I'm just going to steal this code right here. I'm using Command C to copy. And then I'm going to I'm just going to put it in the root of my components for right now. Maybe I'll change this down the road, but for the sake of this tutorial, it's fine to leave it right here. I'm going to call it paginate.view. And I'll add my template. And I'm just going to paste that right there. We just stole that from Vuetify.js. And we'll add our script tags, Command S to save. Now, by default, it wants our pagination to have a V model of page. So let's go ahead and allow it to see what the page is in our user's return data. What we want it to see would be right here. We want it to see all and then current page. So let's tell it how to see that. So I'm going to put a computed property in here. I'm going to call it current page. And then we're going to get the current page from our user store. So I'll say return this store state users, and I want the current page, which should be current underscore page. So we'll do current underscore page. Command S to save. It also wants the length. So let's go ahead and see. Let's see what the length property is first. Length. The length of the pagination component. The default is 0. So the length of the pagination component. All right, so the length of our pagination component is going to be the number of pages. And we know that based on this, the number of pages is going to be our last page, so 16. So I want to set the length to 16, but I don't want to manually just put it in there. I want to tell it to come down here and use the last page. We'll call this last page, and we're going to do the same thing. Get, and then return this store state users, and then we want to say last underscore page, and we're just returning this last page right here, so it knows the length of pages is 16. So I can actually change both of these now. So my V model is going to point to current page, and my length is going to point to last page. Command S to save. Our pagination component isn't going to do a whole lot of this right now, but I just want to include it in my users container so that I can start working with it and setting things up. So in order to do that, I'm going to come down here and I'm going to say import paginate from, we'll go up one and we'll say paginate. So I'm importing my paginate component, which is right here. And now I want to tell my Vue component that it exists. So we'll say components and paginate. And now we should be able to put it right down in here. So let's just do paginate, and we'll end it like that. And then Command S to save. Now, hopefully we're expecting it to show us basically an empty pagination down here because we don't have anything in it yet, really. Okay. So because we told it the length was 16, it automatically added 16 buttons for us to click on, but none of them are going to do anything because we didn't tell it what's there yet. So it knows that there's 16 pages. It's going to show us all the pages at the bottom. Now, I personally, if I had, like we said earlier, if we had 151,000 records and we're breaking them up in groups of 10, chances are this list is going to be a mile long, and I personally don't want that. So let's tell the Vuetify component to limit this list. Only show me, I don't know, show me 8 at a time. Show me page number 47 to 55 or something. And I believe Vuetify has an option to do that. Specify the max total visible pagination numbers. So I'm going to say total visible. We'll do total visible, Command C. Let's come back over here, and in our paginate, we can do, I don't know, what did I say, 8? And I believe we have to use that so it knows it's a number. So let's go ahead And we're hoping that this list stops at 8. All right, cool. So it only shows us 8 at a time, which is exactly what we wanted. Now, if this list was crazy long, it'll automatically break it up into separate chunks and allow the user to either paginate this way, and maybe eventually we'll add a little search function up in here somewhere. We'll see how long this video gets. So now we have our buttons here. Our pagination knows how many total pages there are. All right, so let's go ahead and look at, all right, it looks like we're getting an error here. Computed property current page was assigned to, but it has no setter. Okay, that makes sense. We haven't actually made these buttons clickable, so it's when it tries to set the current page to swap between our pagination, we're getting this error right here. If I click each time, if you look at this number 8, if I click 4, it's going to go 9, 14, 10. So this is to be expected for right now. Before we dive into setting this current page up and fixing that error, I want to make sure that this component, this pagination component, is reusable for every component. Right now, the current page, if I was to drop this component into maybe my contacts page or my products page, it's giving me the information for the users module in my Vuex store. So let me go ahead and fix that. In order to do that, I want this paginate component to receive a few props. So let's go ahead and say props, and I want the props to be, so first off, I want to know what store. I also want to know which collection in the store. So if we come over here to users, user will be my store, and I want to be able to define the collection. Right now, I only have one, but maybe I have users, maybe I have something else in the user store, or maybe I have something else in the user store besides users that I want to paginate. So I want to be able to tell my application in the user store within the collection of users or products or whatever it might be. So I'm gonna say props. First, I want to receive the store, and then I want to receive the collection. All right, we'll put a comma. That got rid of that. Now that I changed that, I need to tell my current page and last page to use the store and the collection. Right now, I'm manually hard coding it in here with user and users. In order to dynamically assign that information to tell it to use store and collection, I should be able to say state, and then this dot, I called it store up here, so I'm telling it to use this store, and then I should be able to say this collection. All right, so I'm saying to use this store state, and I want this store and this collection and then current page. So let me go ahead and copy that down here. Double check, make sure it all matches up. So that should be good. Now that I'm telling it that I have some props coming in, I need to tell my original component. So I'm telling it to use paginate, but I'm not actually passing any props. So let's go ahead and say store equals, and the store is going to be user, and our collection is going to be users. So we'll say collection equals users, and then Command S to save. So now we're passing the store and collection to our paginate component. So even though our paginate component doesn't do a whole lot right now, we could technically put this in a products component. We could put it in another data component, and it would at the very least break up these numbers and know the total length. So let's go ahead and refresh. Our error went away, but I'm sure if we click, all right, yeah, just as I suspected. So it still knows that our total length is 16. It knows our current page. It knows that we try to change our current page. So let's go ahead and continue. All right, so our error is saying computed property current page was assigned to, but it has no setter. So let's go ahead and create a setter for this. I'm going to come over here to Visual Studio Code. and we're going to go back into our paginate. Now we need a setter to set the current page. So we should be able to put that right here, set, and we'll say value. So it's going to receive a value. And now we want to tell our user module to set the current page. Now we could go ahead and just add another property in here and call it current page and set it to 0 or something like that. But we know when we received our user data that there should already be a current page property right here within the users. Actually, I'm going to change this because users is an object now that I'm looking at it. Users comes in as an object. Now we already have the current page, but instead of setting the current page outside of the user's object, I want to change it inside of the user's object. Even though I didn't define it in here, when we received our data and then set the users, it actually copied all of this information right here into this user's object. So I'm not going to put it out here, but we know based on the data we received that there is a property called current page inside of the users. So I should be able to come down here and say set current page and then state data and then state.users.current_page, and we want to set it to the data that it received, and then Command S to save. So now we have a setter for the current page, but let's tell our paginate to set it right here. So we're using a computed property for our current page. We have a getter. Now we want to tell it to set the current page, and we can use that setter that we just create here. And then in order to keep this dynamic, we want to make sure to use this store. So we should be able to say this store, and then we want to commit a mutation. So it'll be commit. And in order to use the store that we're passing in, we want to say this store plus a slash set current page. And then we just want to pass in our value. So we should be able to say value and then Command S to save. Now that should get rid of our error. So let's go ahead and try it out. That should get rid of our error. I'm going to refresh. Our error is gone, and then cool. If I jump over here to my Vue tools, my developer tools, and we go to content, container, paginate, and we can see that our store and collection is set. You can see now when I click on current page, I'm changing it. Now I need to tell my application to react to that now that I'm not getting any errors. So now that we can see our current page is changing, we're not getting any errors. Let's tell our application when a user clicks on this page, go ahead and grab that data and load it in our table. Now there's a few different ways we could accomplish. Every time we set our current page, we could tell it to commit a new action, and that action could be to get the next page. We could also add a watcher in this paginate component to say watch the current page, and every time the current page changes, grab the next page. I'm kind of 6 in one hand, half dozen in the other. I suppose there might be some instance maybe where you wouldn't want to set this over here, but whenever the current page changes, you're always going to want to react to it. We're always going to want to paginate for the sake of this paginate component. So let's go ahead and add a watcher in our paginate component. And to do that, all we need to say is watch and current page, and current page is a method. It takes two values, and now we're going to say new value. So we want to know what the new value is, and we also want to know what the old value is. So a watcher gets two properties. It has a new value and an old value. If for some reason we wanted to compare the new value with the old value, we could, but this watcher is only going to execute if there's a new value. If you click on the same button 3 times and it's the old value, it didn't change, so it's not going to execute a watch method. Let me demonstrate that for a second. Let's do console.log, and we'll say we just want to console.log current page click. I'm going to Command S to save, and to show. So if I click on 2, we can see current page click because it loaded. Now if I click on 2, 2 is a new current page click. If I click on 2 again, it doesn't change because we didn't change the current value. So for the sake of this, we don't really care what the old value is because the watcher is only going to execute if it's a new value, not the old value, because the old value technically didn't change. So what we want to do now is to let our application node of Paginate go to the next page, or not the next page, whatever the value is that came in. So let's just check something real quick. I'm going to put that back. Let's just check something real quick. So if I come over here and I'm on my view, I'm in my Paginate, and we see our current page. If I click 3, it changes. 4. What's the value that it would pass in if I click the next button? So it does go to current page 5. Cool. That's what we would expect. So the value that we're receiving, the new value, should be page 5. Let's double check that. I'm going to console.log, and we'll say new val. So just to confirm, we want to know what the values are that we're receiving when this changes. So we'll come back over here and Paginate, current page 1, 16, 15, 14, console log 16, 15, 14, 13, 11, next page 12, next page 13. So the value that we're receiving is the page that it wants. And that's good to know because now we want to tell it to use that page. So we're watching the current page, and when the current page changes, the new value is actually the page requested. So I'm going to create a method down here, and I'm going to call it, first we'll do methods, and I'm going to call it Paginate page. And that's going to receive a value of page. We'll call it a page number, so we know it's a number. Now I want to tell every time the current page changes, this dot paginate page, and pass it the new val. So now every time the page changes, I'm going to execute this method. And what I want this method to do is grab the next page. I'm going to Command S to save. So in order to grab the next page, we need to dispatch an action in our store. Right now, we have the get users action, and we've set it to all, and we know that our Laravel application, when we hit this URL, is going to return some paginated information. So I'm actually going to change this. Let's switch it up just a little bit. Let's say get user list. Since it's not all, it's actually going to be a list. And I'm actually going to change it even more. I'm just going to say get list, because I'm going to use this method in all of my modules. So if I have a module called products, I can add a get list method to that module. And then every time I paginate, I should be able to say this store dispatch, and then I'm going to tell it to use the store that we're in. So that's user, because I'm passing it in as a prop. So I should be able to say this store, and then plus I want to add get list. So I'm expecting if I was to receive the store of user above, this would actually this should translate to this store dot dispatch, and it's going to dynamically receive a store, but we know the store we're currently using is user, so it should look like this: user slash get list. And then we also want to pass in the page number, so I need to add that right here. So we're going to pass page number. So now if I was to change this to a product store or a permission store or any other store, I can receive the store, and then I want to get the list, the paginated list for that store. Keep in mind, depending on how you're building your application, I'm going to assume that this user store is only going to have one list of data. I suppose you could call this something else. You could dynamically pass in some other props so that you can be more specific about what you want this to be called. Maybe you pass in a prop up here and call it list so that you can specify the list. For the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to assume that every single module over here, I'm going to be this consistent across the board. So my user module is going to have a get list. My product module is going to have a get list. My whatever data module is going to have a get list, and that get list is always going to return paginated data from my Laravel application. So let's go ahead. I can get rid of this. So I'm saying this store dispatch, I'm receiving my store, and I'm saying use the action get list and use this page number. Now, I just broke my table when it loads because I changed my store from get users to get list. So let's refresh. And as I expected, there's no more get users. So let's fix that. And I can come over here to my container. And originally I didn't have to pass a value over here because I was just saying get everything. Now I'm going to say user get list. And for my page number, I'm going to pass it 0 because I want page 0. As I'm editing the video, I realize Laravel wants the current page, which is probably page 1, not page 0. I'm going to leave it as 0 for right now, but for the sake of this, you could probably just use page 1, a number 1, and that'll do the trick. It looks like 0 is working by default though. Command S to save. I just want the first page of the users list. But I also need to change, if I refresh, it's still not going to work. Oh, it did work. It did work. Why did it work? Okay, because we're just saying all. So it got, by default, we got the first page. I actually want to add the question mark page equals and then plus page number. And we want to receive page number. Command S to save. So now we're receiving our page number. We're getting our list all page number, and then we're going to set it. We'll refresh. We're still working. Let's check out Paginate. So now when we click one of our page numbers, we're expecting it to dispatch the user store, get list, and then a page number. Let's see if this is working. Very cool. So we're actually only grabbing, if I check in my network tab, we're going to all page number 1, page number 2, page number 3. We're only getting 10 records at a time instead of 10,000 records at a time. Our application knows the total amount of records based on our last page, and we're able to tab through Very cool. And you can see over here as I'm clicking these buttons, it's grabbing the next page. It's automatically changing these based on the page number that I'm at. So I think this is a good stopping point. If you want to, you could go ahead and try and change out your, if you wanted to, you could go ahead and maybe try adding an extra prop in here. I'm not going to do it for this video. I feel like it's already getting a little too long, but maybe create a new prop and call it list and allow yourself to define a list within your Vuex store. You know, that would be kind of cool. It would make your component a little more dynamic. So at this point, you should have a pretty good idea on how to return paginated data from Laravel. You should have a good idea on how we use that data to set our length to view the current page, the last page, the next page, and how to dynamically modify our paginate component to go to these next pages or the previous page. Thanks for watching. Hopefully I was able to show you something you didn't already know 36 minutes ago. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to sign up for notifications.